Hans McPherson, the Montana Farm Bureau president, here with us now, live from Austin, Texas. Hans, great to have you on the show this morning.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So first off, I guess tell us, what's the biggest takeaway from a Montana perspective? What's the most important thing that you think Montanans need to know based on what you're seeing and hearing and talking about down there in Austin?
Well, today we start our grassroots resolution, and that's going to be a lot of work, and it's what we come here for. But we've been well fed the last 2 days. As you stated, we had President Trump address the Montana, all of the delegates. There's over 5,000 people here. President Trump addressed us on Sunday. And then yesterday we were thrilled to hear from Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue. He spoke to us for over an hour, and it was awesome. And the things that they're talking about, President Trump is very, very exciting to listen to, with all the trade deals and more importantly, all the regulations that he's doing away with that have been burdensome on the American farmer and the consumer alike. I mean, every time you get a regulation, it costs money. And the real consumer spending power has greatly been increased. But we were just excited, and there's 38 people from Montana here. They're going to go home with their own version of the news and tell people, and it'll be the truth, because there isn't a twist to it. And in your news hour there, you talked about how people are portraying the gun rally in Virginia, and it's not true. And it's the same thing here. But when President Trump talks about the trade deals that have been made and how bad they were and how long they've been bad and how much more agriculture is going to be exported, that's exciting news for Montana farmers and ranchers, and I'm just thrilled. And the water regulations, I mean, we don't do much in Montana without irrigation water, and he's announced that he's taken the Army Corps of Engineers and getting them out of the way of farmers and their irrigation water. And this will be a great boost for Montana.
Yeah, I saw Sonny Perdue, the Secretary of Agriculture, there, and talked about the Phase 1 China trade deal. He was on Fox News on Mornings with Maria, so I'll play a little bit from him later in the show. But talk about just the significance and the optimism in the room, because I know that a lot of farmers and ranchers back here in Montana have seen some tough times. Even before the tariffs, prices were starting to go down at the tail end of the Obama administration. But there've been some tougher times, but now with the USMCA, with Phase 1 China trade deal, and so much more, how is that being felt on the ground down there in Austin?
Oh, the electricity in the auditorium is very, very much there. You could really feel it, and there's no doubt that the farmer has been the tip of the spear in this trade war, and there's no doubt that President Trump hasn't felt our pain, and Sonny Perdue, and they have gone to great lengths to make up for that and to try to give us, they did give us a lot of optimism. You mentioned the USMCA and the first phase of the China trade war, but there's more than a dozen other deals right now that have been inked, and Japan going to buy a lot more Montana wheat and a lot more beef, and South Korea, the list of Vietnam, the list of countries was 2 pages long, and it's a lot more optimism for the farmer. I think it's a very, very bright day, and we were just thrilled. This is the 3rd year in a row that we've had President Trump address us here at the American Farm Bureau Convention, and we haven't had a president even visit since Reagan. So it's a good day. It was a good time, and the information will get back to Montana. I've done several of these press releases and different news organizations within the state, and they're not putting a twist on it. It's not like the national news where they have to spin everything.
Hans, again, great to have you on the show this morning. One of the things that I know has been talked about down there are just federal government overreach and some of the regulations coming out of the federal government. Irrigation water, that's a topic we don't hear too much about. What's the rub there?
Well, the Army Corps of Engineers makes not laws, but they call them administrative mandates, and they're making those from Seattle or Omaha or Washington, D.C., and President Trump wants that authority and that ability to go back to the local conservation districts, maybe the county commissioners, somebody like that that's on the local level that actually knows what's going on, and just to get out of the way of farmers who are trying to produce food to feed the world. You know, the other things that have been exciting down here, Sonny Perdue talked about a lot yesterday, was rural broadband. And I know that's a big issue in Montana, and it's put farmers behind the curve. There's rural communities where kids have to drive into town to do their homework, and that's not right. They should have the same ability and privileges as a kid living in a city. And so that's another area that's been talked about. The rural mental health, of course, is a big issue. Montana leads the nation in suicides, and that's something, and the opioid crisis. Those are all things that are being discussed down here and need to be discussed and need to be addressed because they're serious problems for rural America.
Well, and talking about, going back to the Corps of Engineers and irrigation projects and all this, I know one of the frustrations I've heard from folks back here in Montana is it seems like the federal government spends all this money on studies, study this, study that, study that, and then you have state studies and all this stuff gets paid for, but then they got to study it again and they study it again. It's like, why don't they just get this stuff done instead of just studying it all the time,
Well, the purpose of a study usually is to delay and demoralize the people who need to get something done. They can study it and study it and study it, and it take you forever. The red tape, if you were to try to build a big building or something anymore today, you've got 10 or 12 years of studies and permitting to go through, and that should be 1 to 2 years, that it can be done.
Yeah, it was like, kind of separately, I've just marveled at the fact that, hey, we had that fire destroy the chalet in Glacier National Park. And, luckily, thanks to former Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke and the Trump administration, it's already been rebuilt now. But heck, if it was another administration, they'd still be studying that chalet in Glacier.
They would have to study it and find somebody to blame.
Yeah, and then there's some ground squirrel would cause a 5-year delay or something like that, and on and on we would go. Well, Hans McPherson, the president of the Montana Farm Bureau Federation, I know you got to run into a meeting here in a few minutes. Talk about just what it's like. I know I've gotten to see President Trump speak in person, here in Great Falls and Bozeman and Missoula and Billings at some of the rallies. What was it like to actually hear him speak and be there in person in Austin, Texas on Sunday?
Well, it is well worth the wait and the time that you go through. Of course, security has to be pretty intense. And there was 5,000 people to get into this auditorium at this big convention center here in Austin. And to get them all through security, they started going through security at 12:30 in the afternoon, and the speech wasn't until after 5. But the place was packed. And nobody complains. I mean, once you're there, it is an awesome experience. It's very, very worthwhile. And to see the President of the United States and how much he cares about rural America and how much he really and truly cares about the farmers of this country is refreshing. And he's not just saying, he's doing. And when you see his list of do's, of things he's got done, it's very awesome. It's worth the trip, I'll tell you.
That's for sure. It's informative, but highly entertaining. That's for sure. He knows how to connect with an audience, and he goes on for over an hour, oftentimes too. It's like, holy cow, this guy's in his 70s, and he's working harder than some folks in their 30s and 40s.
Yeah, and he doesn't have a whole lot of prompter screens or anything like that going on. It's off his head and off a few notes he's got.
Hans McPherson, great to have you join us this morning, especially I know you got a busy day back there in Austin, Texas, so thanks so much for joining us here in the early morning hours of Montana Talks.
You.
All right, good.
Thank you for having me, and check out Farm Bureau, mfbf.org.